Okay, so we now come back to algebra. If you recall, we were looking at ideals and quotient rings. So we are now going to see more of them. So let us start with these beginning observations. Let us take the view for the time being that fields are the most desirable type of rings. We know about fields, but we are saying that fields are the most desirable type of ring. But why? For one reason, we can divide in a field, which we cannot do in a general ring. So operations and properties are results about them approximates our experience with real and complex numbers more accurately. Because we are so familiar with these two systems of numbers, real and complex numbers, particularly real numbers, where we freely divide all the time with non-zero real numbers. So the same is true in a general field. So more than a general ring, fields approximate our familiarity with these two number systems more closely, more accurately. Also, there is another reason. As we already saw in exercise 2 of the previous section, the only homomorphic images of a field F are 0 and F itself. Okay, let me first write, then I will explain. So we cannot apply a homomorphism to a field to simplify it any further. Okay, what is this second point? The exercise 2 in the previous section, that exercise was simply this. If we are given a field F, then we were asked to prove that the only ideals of F are 0 and F itself. And what does this have to do with homomorphic images though? You see, if we are given a homomorphic image of a ring, that is, if R is a ring and R prime is the image of R under some homomorphism, this is onto, so that R prime is the image of R under the homomorphism phi, then it's a homomorphic image. Then we know that the quotient ring is isomorphic to R prime, or we can also say R prime is isomorphic to the quotient ring, where I of phi is the kernel of this homomorphism. So every homomorphic image appears as a quotient ring from some kernel, and we also know that every kernel of the kernel of every homomorphism is an ideal. Conversely, if we are given an ideal I of a ring, then it can be used to construct a homomorphic image of R, and that homomorphic image is R by I, because we know that there is a natural homomorphism from R onto R by I, which maps every ring element onto this coset. So homomorphic images and ideals are in a one-to-one correspondence. You have a homomorphic image, it is coming from some ideal. You have an ideal, it gives rise to a homomorphic image. So that's why, since a field has only two ideals, there will be only two homomorphic images. One of them, according to this discussion, will be this quotient ring, another will be this quotient ring. This is isomorphic to F itself, and this is isomorphic to the zero ring, which, if you want to be specific, this actually turns out to be equal to this. If you find this equality confusing, you go back to the discussion on quotient rings and see what the things there are. Okay, so that's why a field has only two homomorphic images essentially. One of them, this is nothing but 0, and the other is F. So we cannot apply a homomorphism to a field to simplify it any further. You see, when we apply a homomorphism to some ring, suppose I have a homomorphism phi, and this is the image onto, okay, there is a kernel and the elements here are cosets of this kernel. That is, one of them is the kernel itself, which is the 0 element, and the other elements look like this: R1 plus I of phi, R2 plus I of phi. What is happening here is that the elements in the ring that are inside the kernel, they are coming together and they are collapsing to form a single point, and that point is regarded like that is regarded as a point in the second ring, in the homomorphic image. And the other, in other areas also there are collapse. This is say R1 plus I of phi, then there are some other elements which is R2 plus I of phi. So in this sense, the ideal I of phi is dividing the whole ring up into some clumps. Those clumps are being considered as elements, and they are giving rise to a quotient ring. So do you see that we are reducing the complexity of the ring, but at the same time some sort of structure is still preserved because phi is a homomorphism. So some structure of this ring is still preserved here in the second ring. In that sense, we can simplify a ring when we apply a homomorphism to it. That, however, cannot be fruitfully done in a field, because applying a homomorphism to a field gets us only either the field itself or the zero ring. So when we get the field itself, there is no collapse. Because if you have, say, a homomorphism whose domain is a field, codomain is some, range is some ring, then that homomorphism is either a one-to-one mapping or maps all the elements onto 0. So either there is no collapse, every point gets mapped onto itself, and this happens when the kernel is what? 0. Kernel is the 0 ideal. There every point gets mapped onto itself, so there is no collapse. In the other extreme case, when the kernel is the whole field F, then all the points collapse onto a single point. So there we see the other extreme case, but we are not getting anything new. Either we are ending up with the field itself, or we are collapsing all the way, getting a single element. So there is no interesting simplification in between. So that's why, in that sense, fields, from the point of view of applying a homomorphism and simplifying it, fields are the simplest type of ring. And so that is another reason why they are desirable. Okay, so a natural question to ask is whether we can link a general ring in some manner with a field. If fields are desirable, then if we are given any ring, we want to be able to go from that ring to some field. So is it possible? And yes, it is possible. That's why this section exists. This linkage should involve the concepts we already have with us. Homomorphisms, ideals, and quotient rings. But it is still somewhat vague. So we ask a specific question. What do we want actually? The more specific question is this. When is a homomorphic image of a ring a field? If we have a ring and if we have a homomorphism, suppose we want to end up with a field, that this is the homomorphic image, then what is the condition in this situation that these objects should satisfy so that we ultimately have a field? For commutative rings, we answered this completely in this section. So already we have put a restriction. We are going to consider only the case where the given ring is a commutative ring. There we are going to say exactly when we will have a homomorphic image as a field. Okay, so that is our goal. So towards that goal, we will need some preliminary results, and one such result, the first one we will need is actually we will need only one such result. It is the converse to this exercise 2, which says that exercise 2 asked us to prove that the only ideals of a field are the zero ring and the field itself. It will be the opposite to that. So this is our first lemma in this section. If R is a non-zero commutative ring with unit element whose only ideals are 0 and R itself, then R is a field. Okay, so unlike the exercise 2, here we are given that the ring has only 2 ideals. We have to prove that it is a field along with some other conditions that they are also given. Now this non-zero part, it's not given in Herstein's original statement of this lemma. However, we know that if R is the zero ring, then it is also a commutative ring with unit element, and the unit element is 0 itself. Only in the zero ring we have 1 equal to 0, and that cannot be a field. So to avoid that contradiction, we have to assume that R is non-zero. This particular mistake Herstein has committed when he defined integral domain also, if you remember. So with this small rectification, we are now good to go. So let us now see how to prove this. The proof is not very difficult. Since R is non-zero, see, in the very first line we need this. Since R is non-zero, there exists an element a non-zero element in R. Consider the set RA. We have already come across this one. It is the set of all multiples of A from the left by ring elements. And in a previous exercise we also proved that this is a left ideal of R. That was for a general ring R. Here we have a commutative ring. In exercise 14 of the previous section, we have seen that RA is a left ideal of R, but now our ring is commutative. Since R is commutative, Ra is now a two-sided ideal, that is an ideal of R. But it is given that R has only two ideals by our hypothesis. Then Ra is either the zero ideal or Ra is the whole ring, since R has a unit element. Okay, you see, we have already used the fact that R is a non-zero ring. We have also used commutativity of R here in concluding that Ra is an ideal. Now we are going to use, we have now used this other piece of information. Okay, but we have not used this one, so now we are going to also use the fact that R has a unit element. 1, A can be written as 1A by the definition of unit element. So by definition this belongs to Ra, but A is a non-zero element and it belongs to Ra, so Ra cannot be equal to 0. Hence Ra is not equal to 0, and we have, so the only other possibility is Ra equal to R. Thus, now think of this thing like this: 1 belongs to R, so since R is equal to Ra, 1 will be a multiple of A by some element. Thus, BA is equal to AB is equal to 1 for some B belonging to R. That is, A has a multiplicative inverse in R. A was any non-zero element. Oh, I should not have written there exists. Let me write it like this: consider any element A not equal to 0 in R. Okay, sorry about that. So any non-zero element has a multiplicative inverse. That is one thing. The ring is commutative, it has a unit element, and it is non-zero. So that's why it is a field. Since R is non-zero, is commutative, and has a unit element, we thus conclude that R is a field. Okay, so this ends the proof of this lemma, right? And this result we will need when we are going to prove our final result of this section. Now we okay, so let us just once more see what we are after. We want something like this. We want to be able to apply some homomorphism on a ring and end up with a field. So definitely the kernel of this homomorphism should have something special about it. It cannot be just any ideal. It has to be some special kind of ideal. So now we are going to define that kind of ideal. So here is our new definition. An ideal M which is not equal to R of a ring R is said to be a maximal ideal of R if for any ideal U of R satisfying this, M is contained in U and U is contained in R, we have M is equal to U or U is equal to R. So if we have a proper ideal M of R, that is M is not equal to R, M is something smaller than R, then that ideal will be called a maximal ideal of R if you cannot squeeze any ideal between M and the whole ring. If you find an ideal satisfying these containment relations, you will end up having either U being equal to M or being equal to R. So in other words, we cannot squeeze an ideal between a maximal ideal and the full ring. Okay, so that's the definition. Fine. Now given any ring, the concept of ideals has been defined in such a way that if we are given a ring R, there are always at least two ideals of R. One is the zero ring and one is R itself. Besides these two, there may be more, but maximal ideals are special. They are maximal in this sense that there cannot be any ideal between them and the ring. But if we are given any ring, does it have maximal ideals? That is a question. That is an existence question. Given any ring R, there is actually no guarantee that R has any maximal ideal. It may not have any. If R has a unit element, then one can prove that R has a maximal ideal. I need some ink. Okay, so with the extra restriction that the ring has a unit element, then you are guaranteed to have maximal ideals. The proof, however, needs something which we haven't seen yet. We have heard the name, it's called the axiom of choice. Actually, the proof, I think if I recall it correctly, the proof does not apply the axiom of choice as such, but it uses something that is equivalent to the axiom of choice. It's called Zorn's lemma. We will see these things and these equivalences that I'm saying this is equivalent to the axiom of choice, and we can use these results to prove some things in mathematics. We will see these things when we get to the further sections down the line in the Tau's notes on analysis 1. Okay, we will see these things when the time comes, but for now let us just be content with the idea that this can be proved, that every ring that has a unit element must have a maximal ideal, and it can be proved with the axiom of choice. Okay, so now having seen the definition, we will now look at some examples. The first example is about our first ring, actually the ring of integers. There we are going to investigate the maximal ideals. Let R be the ring of integers and let U be any ideal of R. Okay, let us first start by taking any ideal. Since U is a subgroup of R under addition, from the results in group theory we know that U consists of all the integer multiples of some fixed integer, say n0, and we write this as U is equal to n0. So what result from group theory are we using here? You see, we already know that the ring of integers under ordinary addition is a cyclic group, and from group theory we know that every subgroup of a cyclic group is cyclic. So that's why we are getting this. So this particular subgroup, which is an ideal of the cyclic group of the additive group of integers, is itself a cyclic group and N naught is the generator. That's the thing. And why are we getting multiples of that integer? That you figure out. Okay. Now the question comes. We want U to be a maximal ideal. Definitely that means we have to put some restrictions on N naught. What is that restriction? What conditions or what condition, okay, let us write plural, conditions on N naught lead to a maximal ideal. What type of N naught makes U a maximal ideal? That is now our thing. So this is the question. Let P be a prime number and